Dober fantasy players and fantasy football fans. Let's take a look at 5 NFL running backs that could be the top fantasy sleepers and beat their Dober projected fantasy point totals in Week 17 of the 2017 NFL regular season. Joe Mixon is hurt, and Giovani Bernard can't handle the Cincinnati backfield all by himself. Even with Bernard blowing up for 27.3 Dober fantasy points last week, Brian Hill still had a nice game with 17 rushing yards and 34 receiving yards last week against Detroit. Hill only needs to get to 10 yards to beat his projected fantasy points total, and we suspect that he'll blow past that in this game. He's a deep sleeper who could have a monster regular season finale for the Bengals. The Steelers are technically still playing for the number 1 seed in the AFC, but with the Patriots merely needing a win against the Jets, the likelihood that this game against Cleveland means anything is slim. Le'Veon Bell was limited just a bit against the Texans last week. After 405 touches in the first 15 games of the year, Bell deserves a bit of a break, and Ridley is the next man in line for carries. He had 9 totes for 28 yards last week against Houston. Those numbers weren't massive, but when you're up against a projected fantasy points total of just 1.5, you don't need much to produce a winning play. The Kansas City Chiefs have absolutely nothing to play for in Week 17. Patrick Mahomes was named the team's starting quarterback, and we have to imagine that means that Kareem Hunt is in for a slow day at the office as well. Sharkhandrick West would be next in line for carries, but the fact that the team is making a big deal out of Kareem Hunt being a full go in practice this week tells us that he is going to shoulder at least some of the load in the running game. Even if Hunt is only used on third downs and in obvious passing situations, we can't see him not getting to 2 Dober fantasy points. With Todd Gurley sitting out in Week 17, Malcolm Brown is set to serve as the lead back for the Rams. Though the Los Angeles offense is probably going to slow down just a bit with Jared Goff and Gurley on the bench, there are still yards to be had against a San Francisco defense that just allowed 33 points to Jacksonville. Brown figures to be the beneficiary as the lead running back. He only needs to muster 60 total yards of offense or a touchdown to post a win on Dober play cards. This is far too low a projected fantasy points total for any major primary runner. Devontae Mays actually has negative fantasy points this year, but this is a good spot for him to ultimately pick up a few carries with Aaron Jones out of the lineup. Mike McCarthy has said that Mays is going to be part of the backfield mix. It isn't going to take much to get him past his projected fantasy points total. Any given carry could be the one that pushes him past the 5 yards needed to post a win on Dober play cards.